This week I was riding the subway. It felt utterly unremarkable. Just another day, just another ride, until I reached my station, stepped off the train, and found myself surrounded by advertisements beseeching me to have my best baby through a service called Nucleus IVF Plus. I checked out Nucleus's website and read that if my partner and I used their method of in vitro fertilization, they could screen potential embryonic candidates for inherited traits ahead of implantation, guaranteeing my future child's hair color, eye color, height, likelihood of autism, and IQ. My first thought was, what the fuck is this? My second thought, that sounds like eugenics. But given that we're in a moment where some of industry's most powerful leaders are combining a fear of declining birth rates with an obsession about inheritable genetic characteristics, I probably shouldn't have been too surprised. Like, at all. My name is Josh Borman.
I'm June Sternbach.
And this is Ill Conceived, a podcast about natalism. Well, we're recording a few days later than usual, but you know, it's after Thanksgiving. Did you have a good Thanksgiving, June?
Oh, a wonderful Thanksgiving. You know, I saw my family. I had wonderful food. I got nice and round and full. It's one of those things where I have two podcasts now. So whenever I'm not recording a podcast every other day, I start to go a little stir crazy.
Right.
I haven't recorded anything for like the last 5 days, and I started like tweaking. I'm like, this isn't right. Like, where's the microphone? Where is the microphone?
In front of a mic right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I went to an unexpected sort of Thanksgiving thing. Originally, I was going to do a Friendsgiving with a friend of mine, but they woke up on Thanksgiving just sick as a dog and sent me a text being like, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to cancel. And so I reached out to a friend who was like, oh, you could come with me to my mom's house.
And honestly, if you hear someone say that, you gotta say yes. You know,
honestly,
you know that mom is cooking,
and she literally was cooking. She was cooking some good food. I had probably the weirdest Thanksgiving I ever experienced, but like weird in a good way. It was just such an odd group of people who were there. One of the people was like a legendary professor in the world of gender studies.
Yeah.
There was a conservative, like Reagan Republican investor guy. There was, of course, my friend's mom. There was another guy
most notable of the bunch so far.
Yeah, there was another guy who was like ex-CIA. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy.
When you texted me that night, or maybe it was the next day, you sent me a Wikipedia article about, like, you were like, I was at this Thanksgiving event and I was here with this person. I'm like, what the? Imagine going to a Thanksgiving randomly and it's like, oh, there's like 3 people with Wikipedia articles in this room right now.
Yes, yes. I mean, I imagine if you got invited to Thanksgiving in like River North or Gold Coast, it would be a very, very similar kind of crowd.
Yeah, probably. Maybe next year I'll shoot for that. I'll be sorry family, sorry, fuck you guys. I gotta communicate. I gotta commiserate with the elevated folks down in River North. Yeah, we'll see.
I'm gonna have to get connected with some natalists and do a natalist Thanksgiving next year. At the end, we all fuck the turkey
for your best baby.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, hey, speaking of best babies, you, dear listeners, are our best babies, and you've sent us more mail for our fantastic, world-famous mailbag segment.
Yippee!
And again, if you yourself would like to hear your letter read on our show, all you got to do is send an email with your thoughts related to this week's episode to illconceivedpod@gmail.com. We always try to read 1 or 2 of your letters on the main show every week. And then, of course, we also have a Patreon where we read even more of your letters and talk more about the episodes that we've done in the past. And that can be found at patreon.com/illconceived. So the first letter here is from Greg. It's called Childhood Ep and Brain Development. Hey, flips a coin, Josh and June.
God damn it.
In your episode about childhood, you mentioned that the prefrontal cortex doesn't stop developing until you reach 25 and how this fact is often weaponized to infantilize and dismiss the concerns of immature people. Immature there in quotes. But I wanted to point out that this fact is actually a myth. There's no real consensus on exactly when the prefrontal cortex stops developing, or even if it ever does. The most cited study, which claimed that development continues until you reach 25, got to that result by accident. The study only tracked growth until participants were 25 and then stopped.
Oh.
Even if it were true that 25 was some magical maturity number, the way natalists use facts like this is often very oppressive, so it seems worth pointing out when their claims aren't backed by real science. Love the show. Keep it up.
Genuinely really thankful for this correction, because I think this is like something that you see very often in right-wing spaces, not even just natalist spaces, but right-wingers will also like often cite a very like out of context statistic or piece of data, and it's like, okay, well, this is like without any like further context of the study, it doesn't really mean anything. Like this is like just you weaponizing this fact for some sort of sexist or racist or like end. And they'll always be like, well, facts don't care about your feelings. It's just a fact. And it's like, well, if the fact actually means nothing out of context, you are just weaponizing stats. I forget there's this really famous book, and despite it being really famous, I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but there is a really good book about the weaponization of statistics that talks about this that I read like a decade ago.
Is it Weapons of Math Destruction? I just looked up books that are about that, which is about like big data, algos, stuff like that.
No, this is separate from the internet. It's more to do with context death, if you know what that concept is. It's called something similar to that.
Okay.
But it's about how like you can pull individual statistics or events, and out of context they might be like, oh my God, this is crazy. But it's it doesn't really like the context is what's important. I hate to go a little, Jordan Peterson on this, but like actually that is like definitely true for a lot of things like this.
Well, yeah, in the context of this specifically, it should be noted too, brain development and like human maturity, it's very easy to do the thing that I did foolishly and throw out sort of a pseudo stat or a pseudo fact to explain something that is very complex.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about something like human development in the way that the brain matures, obviously like neuroplasticity and the fact that your brain has less neuroplasticity as you get older, that's true. The fact that the prefrontal cortex changes more and is more adaptable when you are younger, also true. Yeah. And I guess that was kind of the point that I was trying to make about just the nature of maturity and decision making and stuff like that. But when you reduce it down to just that little bite, yeah, I think you lose so much of that really important information. I hope, though, that the broader point that I was trying to make still made sense, though, about how, like, when it comes to childhood, you ultimately have to draw an arbitrary line, and that maturity itself is somewhat of a fluid thing. And so you just have to be like, this is what the legal definition is because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Exactly.
And that's why right-wingers tend to use these sort of facts the way they do, because it sort of muddies the water. Pop science, we love Bill Nye, but sometimes pop science, not always the most useful when you're making like sweeping laws about like protecting people, you know?
Yeah. Well, and we got another letter here as well. This is sort of more, we like hearing from you about your stories. I think this is more of a letter like that.
Absolutely. This one is titled, What is Childhood and Evangelical Gender Bullshit? This is from Indigo. Dear June again, and Josh. I don't know why I get a double victory today.
Well, that actually means that we've tied. You get a double. Wait, no, you win.
I do, yeah, because you didn't get one there. Good day for me. We love the holidays. Okay. In your most recent episode on the concept of childhood, thank you for discussing how the evangelical Christians and natalists, in this case, Richard Hanania specifically, assumption that human nature is to fuck and make baby as much as possible is insane and extremely damaging in a lot of ways. I was surrounded by a lot of this narrative growing up, and it has fucked me up in a lot of ways. For context, I'm an assigned male at birth and was surrounded by evangelical Christians for most of my childhood. I'm asexual, aromantic, and agender, and was taught none of those terms when I was growing up. What I was taught was that by virtue of me being AMAB, I would be inevitably tempted to fuck anytime I let myself be alone with a woman. This led to me developing a lot of unhealthy internalized bullshit and serious body image issues because this clicked very poorly with my experiences, particularly because I find the idea of myself having sex with another person to be gross. To be clear, I understand that it's a normal desire for others, but it is very much not so for me. Specifically, I isolated myself from others in my early adulthood because I didn't fit well into the toxic masculinity and redneck cosplay culture I was surrounded with, and assumed that having non-male friends wasn't an option, and also developed a lot of body image issues because thinking about how I would have a biological urge to fuck anything around me if I let myself be tempted to do so, and am still trying to unlearn the internalized bullshit of viewing parts of my body as inherently disgusting, because I believed they would lead me to do things I very much didn't want to do, and or I wouldn't have control of my urges because I was AMAB. This also led to a lot of extremely alienating experiences, including the bizarre experience of participating in a guy's Bible study group at college, where basically every dude in the room except myself admitted to struggling with watching porn, in the context of it being considered sinful and asking others to pray for them, or getting ridiculed by a friend at the time who would likely hate crime me now if they were still in touch, for playing a woman character in a game of Dungeons and Dragons. In hindsight, this was very much an attempt at exploring gender stuff in an environment that wasn't safe to do so, and said friend probably assumed I was trying to do some weird sexual shit. Anyway, thank you again for the discussion of the weird biological arguments natalists make, and keep it up with the good potting. Kindly, Indico, a pronoun person with psychological problems. I love the idea that they sign off with that with every email. That's
all pronoun
awesome.
People need to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
you
just,
always
you gotta
sign off as a
with
pronoun
it.
person, right?
Absolutely. You have to. It's way too fun.
Yeah.
But thank you for this email.
Yeah, this is really thought-provoking. We've heard from a lot of listeners who have experiences like this, where particularly folks who are like asexual really feel left out and just very, very confused by the perception that others around them have, because the assumption is, all of these things, it's just the way things are. Mm-hmm. And then when you're not having the same experiences as everybody around you, and you don't have the language to describe what's going on, and everybody else just assumes that you are like lying, I guess, or acting in bad faith or whatever, it just must be so profoundly alienating.
Yeah, and especially for queer people and especially trans people. I mean, this sort of narrative is very clearly very widespread, especially in religious spaces. So that's why we see so many TERFs being like, oh no, this trans woman they can't go pee in the same room as me because they're just gonna they're gonna be perverts. They're gonna do evil things. When it's like, well, no, like that's like, why would a trans person need to do all that and transition to be like a pervert in the bathroom? That's
they're gonna whip their dicks out and put them out under the stalls.
Yeah, like that's just not what happens.
Wait, what do you think is going to happen? That's the thing that I don't understand, is like, genuinely, what do they think is going to happen?
I really don't know. And it's like that really, and in an odd way, that sort of line of thinking really dismisses and underplays like how bad sexual assault can be, and like just how that can affect people. It's just a really bad argument that is so widespread throughout all of society. And it really always comes down to talking about humans as if we have like no self-control, and it's all down to like crazy biological desire. And that's sort of, it's kind of disgusting. It's very disturbing that a lot of people think that way. Well,
the rest of this episode, unfortunately, is also going to rely on a lot of hasty conclusions about so-called human nature. So I hope you're strapped the fuck in, June.
Oh, I'm ready.
We're talking about eugenics this week.
Yay, my favorite. No, I've been wanting to talk about eugenics and IQ, especially IQ, because I don't know if you've noticed, but like, the internet, specifically the far right, of course, has really normalized the use and discussion of IQ as a genuinely real thing that actually matters, and is like, people talk about it in such a way that is so nonchalant. It's sort of crazy. Like when I was a child, like when I was in high school, I knew this shit was just sort of like busted theory that is like should not be taken seriously. So now I'm like, you know, I just recently turned 30. I go online, I go on Twitter, and it's like everyone on Twitter, and of course, like mostly entirely right-wing people, talk about it like it's this real thing. It's like, I feel crazy. I feel insane.
Yeah, and not just as a real thing, but as something that is predictive of everything. Like
Yes.
that it is a single number that can determine a person's entire future, essentially, and their capacity and their ability and everything else. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about that in the context of the eugenics movement more broadly. June, I was texting you about this, but there are a few moments in this episode where I think you might, I don't know. We'll see what your reaction was, because there were numerous times while I was researching this that I found some connections that made me have to get up and take a walk around the apartment. Like,
that's always a good sign.
Yeah.
When something you find is so upsetting, you just like, you have to take a break. You have to turn off the screen. Yeah.
So, dear listener, I do this for you.
This whole show has honestly been an effort to fill our brains with as much horrifying shit as possible.
That's
and
right.
distill it down.
That's right. So let's talk a little bit here about the origins of the eugenics movement. I think eugenics is probably a topic that we're going to keep coming back to on this podcast. I think I'm probably going to be doing more episodes about different components and aspects of the movement. For this one specifically, because this is our season 2, the season of technatalism, I'm specifically focusing on the way that eugenic ideas and eugenic policies have sort of translated into aspects of modern day technatalism. So with that said, there will be more on this topic. I'm only covering a slice of it. And what we're going to look at specifically is the origin of this. So the modern eugenics movement began in the early 20th century, but it finds its forebears a little bit earlier than that. In the mid-19th century, the United States began to experience really significant immigration from non-Western European nations for the first time. So in particular, there was Chinese immigration to California. That led to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which was the first major anti-immigration law in the United States. And basically what the Chinese Exclusion Act did was it barred Chinese immigrants from entering the country for 10 years. And all Chinese immigrants who were in the country already were subjected to heavy surveillance.
It's, you know, it's one of those things that I feel like I always go back to talking about, like immigration. Immigration has been such a long running, like controversial thing in this country, which is crazy to me. You know, it's like very typical lib thing to say where it's like, oh, this country was built on immigration, which it was, like, obviously, like after colonialism for like the first couple centuries. But like the fact that like every type of different demographic and ethnic group had to like go through this sort of like hysteria against them throughout all of our history. Because, you know, my family on my mom's side is very Italian. And I was talking to my grandma and she was like, yeah, my grandparents, like they were the first people to move here from Italy. And they were like, they didn't speak a lick of English. And that's why, like, they thought that people at that time thought my great-great-grandparents were undocumented. There was like the slur WAP. That's what the without papers is what that means.
Right.
So that was like used against Italian people too, like all sorts of different groups.
And that would have been right around this time too, late 19th, early 20th century.
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely. It would have been the early 1900s for them. Yeah.
So you might ask, like, well, what does this have to do with eugenics? You know, we're talking about immigration policy. What's the connection there? And one of the books that I came across in my research for this episode is called Predatory Data, Eugenics in Big Tech. It was just published this year by University of California Press. It's by a professor named Anita Se Chan, and she writes the following. Diversely oriented for the enrollment of everyday individuals, professional classes, and social institutions alike, eugenicists needed to popularize not only the general idea that individual identity was based on fixed and thus predictable traits that social mechanisms could track in order to optimize. They needed to generate acceptance, too, for graduated suspensions around liberal personhood and individual liberties, and their foundation in principles of equality, possessive individualism, and autonomy in the interest of advancing social optimization and ensuring white supremacy. So, in other words, you can't just maintain the superiority of like the people who have been in the United States since the Mayflower or whatever, simply by letting people into the country and allowing whatever social order to develop that will arise from that. You need to have a mechanism by which you can uphold and enforce a power structure where you are on the top. And eugenics allowed for that.
I mean, this is sort of linked to what we were talking about fairly recently with like the white replacement theory. This is the white replacement is just the long running manifestation of this type of thinking and this movement. Yeah.
So going into the 20th century then, with this in mind, right? This idea of here's these immigrants, they're scaring us. We need to figure out a way that we can continue to order society in a way that benefits us. This is where we get the rise of eugenics. And I want to introduce now a man known as Henry Fairfield Osborn. If you've studied the early eugenics movement in any capacity, you've probably heard of him. He was a paleontologist and geologist. He worked at Columbia University, right here in the city of New York, as well as the American Museum of Natural History. He was the guy who got like a lot of those dino bones that the Natural History Museum still has now.
Oh, that's
he was wild. The dino bone guy.
I'm very jealous. Have you ever like gone to a museum where they like sort of have on display like the dinosaur bone room where they sort of like you can see them like sort of dusting off bones and like working on stuff?
Yeah, the American Museum of Natural History in New York City.
I have not been there, but it sounds
it's great.
Amazing.
You should go.
It's a shame that it seems like the main bone guy, the original bone dude, is sort of a bad fella, a bad dude.
Many such cases, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Once people get a little too into bones and bone structures, especially with humans, you start getting a little sketchy.
Well, that's what's kind of goofy, right? Is again, you'll notice that he was not an archaeologist.
No.
He was a paleontologist and geologist. His focus was not human history.
Yeah. Okay.
But he had some opinions. He had some opinions about which people were the best people. And it turns out that those people were white.
Many such cases from people like this. What led him to believe that? What caused this guy to make that shift from just sort of general geologist to sort of race scientist, the founder of race science in this country, it sounds like?
I mean, I think he just was racist. Part of it is his class background. I mean, he was wealthy. His father was actually a railroad tycoon. His whole family were like really wealthy people in the New York City tri-state area.
He was a Nepo hire. Okay, that makes a lot more sense now.
And just to give you a sense of like how connected his family was, his aunt was J.P. Morgan's first wife.
Come on. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's like the upper echelon class of society at this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this comes back to exactly the thing that I was mentioning a moment ago. These are the kinds of people who are going to be very fucking afraid of immigrants.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Even though, in a lot of cases, especially it sounds like you said he was the son, did you say, of a rail tycoon?
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, I could be a little wrong. Didn't a lot of Chinese immigrants, especially on the West Coast, build the railroads probably for his father?
Yes.
That's so many cases so many cases of American history, white people using and exploiting people for their labor, but also being terrified of them in this capacity.
Because if these people can achieve a station in the country where they are more than just surplus labor, that means that they can begin having power. And also, if you want to talk about like labor violations and the infamous working conditions on the railroads, it does stand to reason that if those people gain some power, it could be pretty bad for people like old Henry's dad.
Yeah. I mean, the implication, whenever people on the right talk about like, oh, white people will no longer be a majority in the United States in like 10 years. And it's like, okay, but why is that a problem? They'll always be like, oh, well, that's just like a bad thing. Like, right? Isn't that a bad thing? But like the implication there is that what was done to like different minority groups will be done to like white people or something. That's usually the implication, that there will be like some sort of vigilante justice, or not even vigilante, like some sort of widespread violent justice or something like that, which says a lot to how they view other groups of people, that they would assume other people would just do what white people did to them.
Right. Because despite this belief of like inherent white virtuosity, I think on some level there is that fear that they're going to reap what it is that they have sown.
Yeah, definitely.
In terms of what Osborne did to popularize eugenics in the country in the early 20th century, he founded something called the American Eugenics Society. This was in 1922. So again, very noteworthy, the timing here. This is right as scientific racism is making inroads in Italy, in Germany. This is, going right into the rise of the Nazi Party. I'm not sure if Osborne himself was a committed Nazi, but it's worth noting that with the American Eugenics Society, a lot of the people connected to that, particularly going into World War II and in the post-war period, were committed Nazi sympathizers.
I mean, that's the thing people forget, and I forget fairly often, is that there was just it wasn't massive, but there was a fairly sizable American Nazi movement.
We've all seen the pictures from that rally at Madison Square Garden.
Oh, exactly, yeah. And if I recall correctly, also Hitler himself also cited American eugenicists in for some of their reasoning as to why they have to do what they had to do in the Holocaust.
One thing that's really crazy, by the way, about the American Eugenics Society.
Yeah.
So it ended up getting renamed a couple times. It was renamed the Society for the Study of Social Biology, and then it got renamed to the Society for Biodemography and Social Biology.
Okay.
It was around until 2019, June.
Come on. 2019. What were they doing like this whole time? What were they doing in the last 70 years post World War II and post German Nazism? What did they do? Were they just like hanging out twiddling their thumbs?
Just wait until the back half of the episode. You're going to find out.
Oh, no. Oh, God. Okay. They were just out here. They were out there the whole time. Oh God.
They're still out there. They're still around. They're still, I mean, the org isn't, but these people are still around us. And that's the big thing that I'm going to try to get to in this episode. So
amazing.
Osborne realized that in order to sort of get purchase for this movement among the US population more broadly, he would really need to emphasize the religious angle. And he proposed this motto for the AES, and they ended up adopting it.
Oh, no.
To raise American civilization through improving the spiritual, intellectual, moral, and physical characters of the American people.
Oh, who are the American people? What does he mean by that? I wonder what he means by the American people.
What did he mean by that?
Yeah, crazy.
What did he mean by this? So their whole thing, one of the biggest ways that they promoted this idea was through something called fitter family contests.
Oh.
So this would be at like state fairs. And basically you'd bring your family and you would be judged based on like how well you comport to the ideal of being sort of, you know, the Ubermenschen, basically, like the most genetically ideal family. And this ended up becoming a pretty major trend. I've got a quote here from an article written by a guy named Graham Baker called Christianity and Eugenics, the Place of Religion in the British Eugenics Education Society and the American Eugenics Society circa 1907 to 1940.
Do you want me to
and I want you to read this one,
perfect.
June. Yeah.
In 1928, there were requests for 42 fitter family contests, with the papers that survived from 2 contests in 1927, each recording over 100 entrants examined. It would not be unreasonable to estimate over 4,000 entrants in 1928 alone. And this figure does not include the large number who would have witnessed these shows as spectators. It is significant, therefore, that the American Eugenics Society chose to bestow the accolade of eugenic fitness to the winners of these contests with a biblical motto that Madison Grant had been appointed to find. Yea, I have a goodly heritage.
Yeah, heritage.
Fucking heritage. A heritage.
Goodly heritage.
Oh, God. The fact that it's like, yeah, no, they're judging physical traits, talking about heritage and genetics. This is, you know, I feel like this is one of those things that there's a lot of American history that's not really taught very much in schools. And I'm not saying that in a way where it's like, oh, schools are bad, schools need to whatever. But like there are, it's just a fact that a lot of things are not taught in American history. It's like the Vietnamese War. And like, I feel like we should sort of talk more about in American history about how in the 1920s, this was just sort of a thing that people would engage with, like genetics in a very eugenics way. I feel like up until the last year, I didn't really know the depths of American eugenics.
Yeah, and the fitter family contest thing is so crazy too, because it's like you're judging families in the same way that you would like judge a pig.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. Like livestock.
Same thing. It's like you go down to the fair, see the prize-winning cow, the prize-winning pig, and the prize-winning family?
You go to Iowa, there's the butter family. Perfectly fit. Very good heritage.
But the thing about this, too, is that when you're talking about getting Christians to be on board with the idea of eugenics, you are going to run up against some resistance from some Christians, because particularly when you're talking about like fundamentalist Christians, they're going to be opposed to the idea of human evolution. And so much of this eugenicist idea is we need to follow in the path that evolution has so forth been setting out for us, and we need to continue that trend. But these are people who, by and large, are going to be wary of the idea of like human progress in this way. And so one of the things that Osborne had to do was figure out a way to make this idea palatable to your normal ass, like going to church every Sunday type Christian. And the way that he squared this circle was with Calvinism. And Calvinism, of course, the idea that God chooses everything ahead of time and, predestines your life for you. And his elect, the people who he loves and has chosen to be his in a special way, they're the ones who he is driving the future for. And so, here's where you put those two concepts together. If nature is guided by natural laws, and God creates those natural laws for his people, the elect, well then of course eugenics is going to be the natural next step, because that is how you expand the elect, because the elect are not just going to be like morally upright, they're also going to be genetically sound, and that's the way that we continue to reform the world for God.
I see. So so basically the line of thinking, the melding of these two theories is just that like they are enacting God's will essentially by taking this in their own hands, using the world that we live in to sort of bring about the world that God intended, not even intended necessarily, but sort of envisions the people, his people, God's people bringing about.
Yeah, because like the idea is we are his acting agents in this world. This is, again, a very, very Calvinist idea. This is the kind of shit that I grew up with.
I love that under Calvinism, everyone is the Pope, essentially. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're all our own little popes. But I guess I'm also just curious to hear from you here, June, too, about like how this idea strikes you. Like how, like merging these two things together, does this strike you as a foundation on which things have since been built, I guess?
I mean, absolutely. I like, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about this today, I don't think, but this sort of strikes me as, like, I totally understand from, like, the Nazi German perspective how this sort of all came together. Like, this is, like, you have to, like, purify the world, right? You have to, like, from their framing, from the framing of the eugenic idealist, I suppose, it's like this is like a moral thing. This is like a moral imperative. It's not necessarily religious, but this is, I guess, like I'm also seeing this as like an interesting, like early unification of like science and religion in like a really bad and evil way, like sort of like how we saw the great unification of evangelicals and Catholics in like the 70s and 80s. This is like, I feel like this is maybe a very notably similar unification of science and like religion and like way earlier.
Definitely. And We're not really going to be talking a lot about this today. This will probably also be something for a future episode, but it's worth noting that the sort of ideological valence of this movement was a little unusual too, where a lot of the people who were steadfast eugenicists were committed progressives.
Really?
Not socialists really for the most part, but the people who were on board with social reform causes like women's suffrage and that sort of thing also tended toward eugenics, and that also went along with like prohibition. The idea behind all of this stuff was we have the ability to make a more moral world around us because we are able to engineer pieces of this morality by improving the population through any means necessary.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because I've always heard and knew about the fact that I believe this might be incorrect. I didn't just look this up. But the person, one of the original founders of Planned Parenthood, I think,
Margaret Sanger.
Yeah, she was a eugenicist as well. It was a very similar thing where just at the time, the early progressive ideas were just like, oh, but we can like purify all of the like bad things in the world. Like that's progress, right? And it's like, well, that gets into really dangerous territory where it's like, okay, but now is progress only like aborting black children, or like are we going to abort gay people? Like it gets into really treacherous territory where it's a philosophy question at that point, right? It's like, okay, but where does the morality begin and end? And for some of these people, it was very clearly sort of on the more Nazi side of things.
Definitely. And you can also, I think, trace a line from here right through to the current moment where you have the tech natalists who we've been talking about for the past few weeks.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, they don't worship the Christian God, although some of them do. Some of them on the Protestant side, some of them on the Catholic side.
I think the most notable figures do it performatively. Like
definitely.
Like Elon Musk, like probably Balaji, like all these people. I think it's all performative. I think it was also performative, probably. I don't even know if he was, but it was very clearly he understood he had to do like a very performative unification of Christianity. Henry Fairfield Osborn, like that's sort of like a weird through line, is like this original eugenicist is sort of the playbook for like these tech natalists today, like especially people like Elon Musk.
Yeah, understanding the way that they can sort of play people off of each other and appeal to a core anxiety or a core idea. Because you're exactly right. Elon Musk isn't a fucking Christian, obviously, but he will sometimes be like, the God. It's crazy.
Peter Thiel too. He had that whole talk recently that was like, oh, the Antichrist. Oh, the Antichrist is here. And it's like, no one believes you're a fucking Christian. Like, come on, man.
Come on.
Like, this is so performative, and like, it's almost offensively performative.
But this core idea here, this idea that we can improve the human race through selective breeding, that is the message that Osborn is able to get through his American Eugenics Society, along with many others, of course. But then there's a question, right? Well, how do we, this is the question you were asking, how do we determine what the populations are that should be prioritized for breeding, for reproduction, versus the populations that should be suppressed? Right.
Because that once you start making these calculations, you will have to start drawing a line somewhere. Like inherently, if you take this idea seriously, you just have to.
And so this is where we get the idea of intelligence testing. Boo! We are a anti-intelligence testing podcast,
literally,
folks.
yeah.
So the first practical intelligence test is something called the Binet-Simon test. It was created by a couple of French guys, Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon. Basically, the French government in 1904 commissioned a survey, an assessment, because they wanted to be able to find out what students might need special education, what students might be susceptible to having learning difficulties and therefore might need a little bit of extra attention. That's what the Binet-Simon test was made for. And it's worth noting, Alfred Binet himself did not see it as something that would be predictive of like learning outcomes, career outcomes, or really anything other than a one-time assessment point for where a given student was at a given point in time.
And that makes sense. I mean, obviously even still today, there is a need for like more precise or a lot more constructive education. I mean, think of it this way. A very easy example is children sometimes have stutters, and they're like a child will need to they will need to have extra effort in schooling and like from an educator to sort of break a stutter sometimes. I knew someone who was in my class when I was in like fourth and fifth grade, and he had a stutter, and he would like do extra little classes like after lunch period where they would work on that. And that's like, all of these, this test here, and as we'll get to IQ, there is a specific standard in mind here. That's not like a grand like design. It's not like this was a God-given test. This was just like a very, not everyone will learn the same. So if we create this like scale, we can see where people are at for like level of education today. Yeah.
And have you ever taken an IQ test? Like sort of in the classic mode of classic IQ tests?
Never have. I have no idea what my IQ is, and I'm going to die that way.
Yeah, no, I have never done like a formal IQ test either. I have out of curiosity, like checked the stuff online. Generally speaking, the form that these take is like pattern matching and pattern prediction.
Yeah, literally.
Where you'll like have a shape and then another shape, and it's like predict the shape that will come next.
Yeah.
That tends to be what these tests look like.
So it sounds like very similar to sorts of questions that are involved in like the ACT and like very traditional like standardized testing like throughout early schooling and stuff.
It's a little different insofar as like the SAT and ACT are assessing for like classroom learning around subject matter.
Yeah.
Whereas the Binet-Simon and its American successor, the Stanford-Binet test, are more abstract and are more just about being able to identify visual patterns and then predict future pieces of that pattern, which is definitely measuring something.
It is.
But it's, in terms of what it was measuring, let's put it this way. It wasn't what it ended up being used for eventually, because a man named Henry Goddard, this is an American, he ended up getting his hands on the test, translated it into English, and started using it as an assessment for general intelligence and future moral behavior.
Moral behavior. Oh my God.
Yeah, so this guy believed that intelligence quotient, IQ, was not just a predictor of moral behavior, but also something that was genetically inherited. And again, this goes back to eugenics, right? If this test is an indicator of how high quality a person is, and if that quality is necessarily genetically inherited, well, that leads to some, I think, pretty clear conclusions. And the way that he graded people, by the way, he actually came up with categorizations for different levels of stupid.
Oh, no.
If you got from 0 to 25 on the IQ test, you were an idiot. That was the actual definition. Like, that was the definition of idiot, was 0 to 25 on this test. 26 to 50, you were an imbecile. 51 to 70, you were a moron.
I just like how society has changed, because people just throw out these phrases like they're nothing. But back then, you would maybe say imbecile, and people would be like, oh my God, wait, that's like real low IQ.
But at least I'm not an idiot.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, but to me, they all sort of mean the same thing now. Very, very interesting how language changes and reworks itself in an interesting way. So he translated this and was like, oh, these people like understand intelligence across the board. Like these French people cracked intelligence, and it's now forever. This is just how it is. Like, that's what he thought. He saw this and was like, this is solved. Intelligence is solved.
Yeah. And
that is absurd.
A lot of this stuff too, again, the test I was talking about, Stanford Binet, that stuff tends to be more of that pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Whereas the original tests were more to do with, I mean, I've actually got a list here. We love a list, don't we?
It's been a minute since we've had a list, I feel like. Yeah, let's bring out a list. You got a list?
All right, cool. I'm not going to read all 30 on this list, but I am just going to give you a few of them just to give you a sense of the kind of stuff they were assessing for, right?
Yeah.
Verbal knowledge of objects, verbal knowledge of pictures, naming of designated object, comparisons of two lines of unequal lengths, repetition of three figures, comparison of two weights, suggestibility, repetition of sentences of 15 words, exercise of memory on pictures, repetition of figures. So things like this. Okay. And these and other tests, which were, again, claimed to measure general intelligence, they were used to pre-screen and deport immigrants to the United States.
Oh my God.
I'm sure you can imagine that if you're from, I don't know, fucking Italy, and you're asked to repeat 15 English words.
Yeah, that starts going a really bad way. That's crazy. I understand that, like, at a certain level, there, like, if you're analyzing some base level of intelligence, like, sure, you have to have like something, but to start to do like crazy government mandated, like, I don't know, deportations because of that, that's just fucking brutal. That's crazy.
But it comes back to the core thing of control. There's an undesirable group that we don't want to let in.
Yes.
Therefore, if we can test in a way that ensures that they're not going to be able to enter, we're going to test that way, and we're going to frame it as an objective, concrete, quantitative guarantee of human potential.
Yeah, they would maybe, even back then, frame it as like uncivilized. They're uncivilized to be in the United States. We cannot allow them to be in this country because they will dilute our civilization, our American civilization. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
And I mean, the through line to now, again, I think is pretty obvious. Technatalists are obsessed with IQ.
They are. You can't go anywhere without seeing them talk about this still in 2025.
Yeah. They talked about it a bit in some of the NatalCon shit that we watched.
They did. That's right.
And I've got a quote here from our favorite friends, the couple with the weird glasses.
No.
Malcolm and Simone Collins, who I'm realizing I am going to have to do an episode about, unfortunately.
Before we did the first episode of the show, you were like, I'm never doing an episode about those people. I'm never doing an episode about the people with the awful glasses. Never, I swear. And we're about like 25 episodes in, and your hand is being forced.
Yeah. 4 a.m. back at it again with Malcolm and Simone Collins. Anyway, Malcolm and Simone Collins said in 2023, and I quote, "The studies let us know what our genetic predilection for IQ is. We will never choose a child who is less privileged in IQ than either of us."
And the context there is they do IVF for all of their children, right? They might even use that service that you saw the ad for. They might use I think that service is actually brand new, but it's probably a similar thing. Yeah. Yeah, no, this idea that like intelligence is static and unchanging is like, I don't even understand how this is a thing that has specifically caught on these days, because like I can use myself as an example. I don't think I'm particularly like a genius, but I have a very obvious like period of my life in college where one semester in college I flopped. I did horrible. And like,
you were in your flop era.
I was flopping back in like 2017. And like basically it was like I was having a horrible time that year. Lots of bad stuff was happening. Like I just like didn't have the ability, the mental fortitude, the emotional focus and space to like really to focus on school, and my grades really suffered for that. I failed several classes. I was almost kicked out of university, but like after that, you know, like I really like locked in. I ended my flop era, and I retook some of those same classes and got like B's and A's on like all of the ones I failed. And it's like intelligence isn't this static, unchanging thing. It has a lot to do with effort and just like willpower and effort. There is on some level, like there is a like low level baseline of general intelligence, but that also has to do with like your upbringing and like the people, like the way that your parents raise you from like a very young age. It's not like if you take these people seriously, if you let a child be born and do not teach it a thing, do they still think they'll come out to be a genius? Do they genuinely think that?
They will be a genius as long as they are a chonky baby. Yes.
Oh, yeah. That's very true.
Another great example, by the way, of an IQ obsessed technatalist is, of course, Elon Musk, who likes to denigrate people who he disagrees with or dislikes as being low IQ. Got some posts here, some tweets, some recent tweets.
These are a month old, some of these.
Yeah. A couple ones that are a month old. He said, the person responsible for America's space program can't have a 2-digit IQ. At this point, I'm not advocating any particular candidate for NASA administrator. I'm just desperate for someone with a 3-digit IQ.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
By the way, to the point of intelligence not being fixed, he's gotten so much stupider over the course of the past 5 years.
Yeah.
So I feel like that alone disproves this idea that intelligence is a fixed thing, right?
No, there's so many people that have completely cooked their brains by just surrounding themselves with people like these Nazis, these people that Elon Musk has really found himself in camaraderie with, you know? I also offhand, I like that your impression of Elon Musk is just sort of like Beavis and Butthead also. Like, that's really funny. I thought that was a really good touch. That was really good.
What if Butthead had a lobotomy?
I'm sure that happens in the show somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised. But no, I feel like for a lot of these people, and maybe we'll be getting to this soon, but I feel like the like social aspect of a lot of these people online, like Elon Musk, believing in IQ starts as like a joke, because you could read some of these and it's like, oh, he's just sort of like dunking. He's like basically calling people. He could replace that with like moron or whatever, or dumb.
He's got another post here.
They
should really get rid of that 100 IQ maximum for creating an account on Instagram.
What? He's so intelligent. I bet you he has the IQ he needs to watch Rick and Morty.
He's too smart. He's too smart to be on Instagram, June.
Yeah, come on, man.
You have to have a really high IQ to, yeah.
But that's how it starts for so many people. Like, because like, I have no doubt he actually genuinely believes that IQ is this like unchanging, mutable like thing that like predicts everything. But like, I feel like for a lot of people these days, it starts as like just saying it like IQ as a joke, like, oh, you're low IQ.
Yeah.
And then they start reading, I think, the book that we're about to talk about very shortly. And then it becomes like, oh, like it sort of ingratiates them to the idea of IQ in this way and like fixed unmutable intelligence.
Yeah. Well, I think what it does is it provides in my opinion, well, not just opinion, I think factually and demonstrably false framing that appears to explain everything.
Yeah.
It's sort of like when you read Marx for the first time, which actually does explain everything, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can either read Capital or you can read The Bell Curve. And I guess that's what we might as well talk about now is that book, The Bell Curve. You may well have heard of it. This book really helped IQ to come back on the map in a major way. It was published in 1994.
Oh, that's recent. I didn't realize it was that recent.
No, both Charles Murray, he's still around, one of the authors of the book, and he's still publishing. Oh. He's still in residence at the American Enterprise Institute.
Come on.
And Murray publishes this book alongside his co-author, Richard Herrnstein, who is a professor of psychology at Harvard. Now, I want to note, again, Henry Osborne, not an archaeologist. Herrnstein and Murray, not sociologists.
Interesting. It's interesting how this keeps happening with people that become like authoritarians on these specific topics. They're actually not trained in these fields at all.
No, that's the thing. They're authoritarians, but they're certainly not authoritative.
Right. That's what I meant, yeah.
No, I know that's what you meant, but I think what you said was accurate, that they do become authoritarians. Maybe they always have been. But the core argument of the bell curve is that most of the nation's social and economic problems can be traced back to intelligence.
I don't know about that one.
Well, yeah, you might not know about it, but they did. I've got a list of 6 core assumptions that the book makes. And June, I'll go ahead and let you read these.
Sure.
Or maybe we'll do every other. Let's do every other on this list.
So the first assumption is there is such a difference as a general factor of cognitive ability on which human beings differ.
Number 2, all standardized tests of academic aptitude or achievement measure this general factor to some degree, but IQ tests expressly designed for that purpose measure it most accurately.
3 is IQ scores match to a first degree whatever it is that people mean when they use the word intelligence or smart in ordinary language.
Number 4, IQ scores are stable, although not perfectly so, over much of a person's life.
5 is properly administered IQ tests are not demonstrably biased against social, economic, ethnic, or racial groups.
Number 6, cognitive ability is substantially heritable, apparently no less than 40% and no more than 80%.
I feel like number 5 there, that was like the first use case of facts don't care about your feelings or something like that. That's what I got from that one there.
Yeah, and I'll just say right now, this episode is not going to be going line by line through the bell curve and debunking it. But if you would like to read an actual honest-to-goodness scholarly sociological text that debunks it, you can check out Inequality by Design, Cracking the Bell Curve Myth. That actually has 6 authors, so they really worked together on this one. And it was published by Princeton University Press in 1996.
This is another instance of pseudoscience that becomes really big and is quickly debunked. Just like the other example I'm thinking of is the autism is caused by vaccines study that came out, and it was like fairly quickly debunked, but still lives on in the world today as like a true belief.
Well, and the reason that whether you're talking about stuff like the bell curve or the pseudo-scientific connection between autism and vaccines, all of this stuff gets laughed out of academia when any real rigor is applied to it. And that's why this shit doesn't get peer reviewed.
Yeah.
This book was not published by a university press. It was published by Free Press, which is a imprint of Simon & Schuster.
Oh my God.
And so it was not subject to peer review before it got published.
That's like a huge strategy. I mean, that's just goes to show that the like right wing, and I mean, this isn't even necessarily right wing in this instance, but like the alternative like media infrastructure where you can just sort of throw out whatever you want and avoid like actual rigor and like scientific review is. It's crazy that it still works. It's very sad to me that this still gets play. And of course, now with the internet, like it's even easier these days to get these ideas out there. You could just go on Alex Jones and you could tell him whatever bullshit. And it's like, yeah, of course, that makes sense. Yeah.
Or Joe Rogan or whatever. And
yeah.
Because people don't really understand what peer review even is, let alone its utility. The entire point of research is to have other people look at your research, go over it with a fine-tooth comb, and see if there's anything in there that isn't right.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's the point. Like, if you're a good academic, you want your work to be subject to that kind of rigor. But they don't, because they're not real academics.
As someone who got a biology degree and did do a senior thesis and like a big study to go along with that and surrounded myself.
Did you have to defend it or anything?
I didn't defend it because it wasn't for grad school. This was just for undergrad, and they didn't have us defend it. I just had to like go to this like state symposium and give like a big presentation.
Oh, you presented.
I did it in front of a lot of different professors around from a bunch of different schools and a bunch of other undergrads and some grad students. But all of this to say is there is nothing scientists love more than having their shit torn to shreds.
Yeah.
Like they fucking live for that shit. And that's like sort of a miscommunication these days. And I think probably forever between like the average person, the general public and actual scientists is like the average person who's maybe not like super well informed about science will be like, oh, the science is always changing. Like one day you said this and like a year later you said this. What's that about? I don't trust anything. It's like, well, that's like genuinely how science works. When there's new verifiable information that is just better or more accurate than previous information, that is the new standard until that is beaten down with new information. That is not a bad thing. That is people, especially science skeptics on the right and just generally use that as a downside when that is the key factor of science. That is the key thing. That is how we know what we know today.
I mean, one of the things that I love about doing this show is just doing the work, like doing the research. For me, that's the point. The process is the point. I spent... this is not for this show or for any show for that matter, but I spent like 4 or 5 hours last night recording and then putting together a video for a cover of Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen with lyrics that somebody on Blue Sky came up with about the ill-fated microconsole known as the Ouya. Why did I do it? Why did I do it? Well, because I thought it would be funny, first of all, but also because the process of making the thing. Because I had to record it, I had to edit it, I had to fuck around with it a little bit in my DAW, in Logic. I had to put the video together. I had to put subtitles on it. Yeah. Why am I talking like Trump right now? I don't know. The process is the point.
Yes,
and that's not what these people want, right? They don't want a process. They don't want their work subjected to peer review. What they want is to be the authority. When you said authoritarian earlier, June, you were exactly on point. There's a difference between being authoritative in the sense that you put something out that everybody takes a look at, goes over and realizes, wow, this guy really knows what the fuck they're talking about, versus manufacturing consent by using market forces.
Yeah. No, it's all about, I mean, I feel like the through line between pretty much most episodes of the show that we've done is they want control and power. They want to enact, the way that they see that they can enact the change they want and get the power they want is an easy fix-all solution. That's the thing, what all of this is, like IQ and like the bell curve, is that like this is a fix-all solution because, you know, it's complicated. It's complicated acknowledging the fact that we don't know everything and never probably will in our lifetimes. And that's like that. Some people find that uncomfortable. So a certain type of person will hear, oh, I have all of the answers right here, and this is what we can do about it. It's very tempting. It's very tempting to a certain type of person.
Well, and isn't it just so convenient that it turns out that the lines on which IQ tend to be drawn benefit certain groups and disadvantage others?
Yeah,
and isn't it so helpful that the groups that they tend to benefit are the people who are already in power?
Yeah, and especially those are the people that made the test to begin with. That's also the very interesting thing. It's like, wow, this European, very white test seems to really match our preferred groups of people that we want to keep in power and deport the others. Like that's very convenient, honestly. Yeah.
Because that's what they talk about in this book, right? Is that the problems of poverty and just general societal problems more broadly, the things that sociologists spend their entire lives studying. Well, it turns out that all of that is attributable to inherited low IQ. That's it.
Of course. Yeah.
Or the culture of poverty, of course.
It's just so easy, right? It's like it just really simplifies everything down. And like for the bell curve, like I feel like most people have seen memes of the bell curve. Yeah, I think let me just try to describe one where like they're everywhere. So there's the curve, the highest point is in the middle, the lowest points are on the left and right side of the graph. And like on the right side, it's like an image of like a Chad or something like that. And like on the left side, it'll be like an image of like someone who looks very like, I don't know, has some sort of like genetic defect or something.
Or their brain has been turned into a microwave or something.
Yeah, it's usually that. It's usually like Wojak stuff.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you asked the random person who saw and scrolled past one of those memes, if they knew that was like eugenicist like thing, if that was like IQ test eugenic argument, like Nazi type shit, they would not believe you. Like they would be like, what? This is just like a joke. This is just like a thing. I feel like the average person just doesn't really know about that. Like I was made a post talking about how the way that the right frames, instead of colonized, conquered, like the United States, like the right has begun framing the colonization of the United States as conquering. I called that a right-wing argument. And somebody in the replies was like, that's just a fact. That's not right-wing. What are you talking about? It's like, I think people just genuinely don't understand the propaganda that they see in front of them a lot of the time.
I mean, it is true in a sense. Like it was military conquest,
and it is. It's
I guess
true
it is
on the base
it's
level.
It's still more accurate than sort of what I was told growing up, which is we just kind of found this land.
Yeah, that's what we're taught when we're kids. Yeah, it's like, oh, we came here and then we all just had a really nice meal together.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah, but like, and that's the thing. Like on a base level for that one in particular, like it's true technically, but what are they saying? Like, why are they saying it right now? What is the implication? I feel like people don't always get below the like just the pure like the surface level and think about the implications of some of these like sentences and phrases.
And I guess to the point of what you were saying about the bell curve, like the titular bell curve, it does, I suppose, make sense to describe what the title of the book actually refers to. Which, as you were saying, when they talk about the bell curve, they're talking about a normal distribution. This is a standard concept in statistics where you have the distribution of a given sample, and most of the people in a normal distribution are going to fall at the very top, the very middle of that curve. And then as you go closer to the ends of the curve, either the far left or the far right, which is to say numerous standard deviations below or above the median, it goes down. And so there's a handful of people who are at the very, very top of that distribution. These, in the estimation of Murray and Herrnstein, are your prime movers. You know, they're the ones who test so fucking high on IQ that they're going to change the world forever, and it's a fucking guarantee. And then down on the very, very low end are your, well, I guess what Henry Goddard would call idiots, right? Like they're the people who can't be counted on and are of inferior stock. And they make the argument then that, again, using IQ and using measurement of IQ, that certain populations in the country, such as Black people, non-European immigrants, are less intelligent. And the ones who are more intelligent, well, turns out it's white people. How about that?
Also really convenient. That's when when they talk about American society and culture, they also just generally mean white European people.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? There's nowhere on the test that requires you to, you know, recite the lyrics to "Before I Let Go" by Frankie Beverly and Maze.
They should. That would be way better.
They should.
And that's sort of the point, though, is like these tests are arbitrary to an extent. Like there is like a base level of intelligence, but they're arbitrary.
But they don't see it that way, right? They don't see it as arbitrary. They argue that higher birth rates among these undesirable demographics are a threat to American society. Where have we heard this one before, June?
Wow. I could probably just go on any social media, any Trump-aligned social media, and see them talking about remigration right now.
Or
which
any
is like
episode
the idea
of our podcast.
Yeah, that too. But it's like a very prominent idea, like the idea that like, oh, we need to remigrate. We need to get out these other demographics because they're taking us down. They're like, they're tearing down our group intelligence or whatever.
Well, and to the point of group intelligence, right? They end up getting to the conclusion that the emerging future, where our collective intelligence must increase in order to meet the challenges, this is an information economy. And so that means that we need to reorient the nation's productivity away from low IQ manual labor toward high IQ information labor, dictated by and staffed by cognitive elites.
Oh, wow.
And they see the market optimizing toward this. They offer some prescriptions to accelerate the trend, such as allowing companies to administer IQ tests as a form of employee screening.
Jesus.
Limiting immigration, cutting special education, eliminating affirmative action, abolishing job discrimination regulations, and of course, subjecting the underclass to the custodial and surveillance state.
Oh my God, this is insane. This is like evil. I have no problem calling this evil. So like intentionally designing society around subjugating people.
Oh yeah, they're very open about it.
They're very open about like making a very defined class based on like race and like genetics. The fact that they're very intentionally stating that like they need to torture these people, the working but like poverty class, is just absurd.
Well, they don't need to. I mean, it's not torture, June. It's just being surveilled all the time
and being the good little underlings that they should be.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
it's their natural station. It's where they belong. I will also say, you know, maybe it's just like recency bias on the brain, but it makes me think also about what we were talking about in the network state episode, Balaji's whole idea. These two ideas dovetail very nicely with each other.
They do. Yeah, especially because like the type of people that would run a network state would probably be high IQ. Like they would probably base a lot of that on IQ.
Absolutely. Here's what I'll say, right? I didn't read the whole thing, but I gave it a good skim, the bell curve. And this book sucks. It just fucking sucks. I mean, it's not just like everything I've read so far is obviously, I find, I guess, intellectually odious, but just talking about like the book on the merits, right? Like just the craft of the thing itself. The writing style is tedious. The construction is messy. And the thing that I noticed most was like, they just frequently will make very strange assumptions and leaps in logic that just are not supported or borne out by the stuff that they are talking about before they get to the conclusion. So like, I put an example here in the outline, and you can see this here, June. We've got a graph. This is a graph that purports to show, again, I don't know what the source is for this.
That's a good sign right away.
Proportion of Americans below the poverty line. And it goes from 1940 to 1990 on the x-axis, and the y-axis is the percentage. In 1940, we see that the proportion of Americans below the poverty line is just above 50%. And there are two lines. There is the trend line that it says was established between 1939 to 69. That's just the line of best fit that continues to go down. And then there's the actual line of poverty, where you'll see it goes down between 1940 to 1969. And then right around 1969, it stabilizes, flattens, and then sort of ticks up a little bit. And so if you follow that line of best fit from the post-war period, you would assume that poverty would eventually go down to zero. That, of course, is not what happened. It stabilizes around like 10 to 15%.
Yeah.
And here's what the book says about this graph. In 1939, over half of the people of the United States lived in families with an income below the amount that constitutes the present poverty line, in constant dollars, of course. This figure declined steeply through World War II, and then through the Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson administrations. Then came a sudden and lasting halt to progress. As of 1992, 14.5% of Americans were below the poverty line, within a few percentage points of the level in 1969. This history provokes three observations. I'm only going to read you the first observation because the second and third ones are equally inane. But the first is that poverty cannot be a simple, direct cause of such problems as crime, illegitimacy, and drug abuse. Probably no single observation about poverty is at once so indisputable and so ignored. We know that reducing poverty cannot by itself be expected to produce less criminality, illegitimacy, drug abuse, or the rest of the catalog of social problems. Else, the history of the 20th century would have chronicled their steep decline. June, your thoughts on this reasoning? Because I have a lot of thoughts, but
I just off the top of my head, I think this is like a crazy thing to just sort of discount economic factors in crime, like just across the board. Because especially because like these days, like in like the 2020s, we're like at a fairly low. I don't know what the poverty rate is right now, but I feel like it's probably lower than like 10%, possibly, like that we saw in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. But like we're like in the lowest crime, like we have the United States has the lowest crime rate right now, like ever. And the idea that economics are not a factor here because poverty stabilized roughly is sort of an insane assertion with zero evidence. Like I just don't understand, because I've had these arguments before with people where it's like, if you reduce poverty, you will see less crime.
Right.
And I feel like that's just generally, it's not the only factor, but I think it's a fairly large factor.
Right. And just in terms of the raw stats, Census Bureau statistics, the official poverty rate in the United States right now is 10.6%.
Okay, that makes sense. It's probably increasing a little bit right now based off of everything that's happening.
But here's the other thing, right?
Yeah.
And again, this is like just thinking about all of the various ways in which this is inane. Thing number one, the way that we measure poverty no longer really fits what poverty looks like, because poverty was traditionally measured as a multiplier of how much money it costs to put food on the table, and nothing else. But you know what happened between 1940 and 1970? Food got a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
And you know what happened between 1970 and now? Actual cost of living shit, like things you need, particularly from the 90s onward, got a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
But the things that got more expensive are not accounted for in the way that we calculate poverty.
Like everyone can buy a TV these days, but in the 1960s, that was like a luxury good. Now it's turning around the other way. Absolutely.
But I don't fucking care about how much it costs to buy a TV. I care about how much it costs to make rent, how much it costs to educate kids. If you were to aggregate for those statistics, you would actually see the poverty rate probably go back up a little bit.
I think so too.
That's the other thing, is that they don't talk about any of this shit because they're not sociologists.
No.
They're not thinking about the fact that there is a multiplicity of factors beyond just the poverty line. And last thing that I wanted to say about this too, we've talked before about how these motherfuckers always make the assumption that in a perfect system, the line would go to zero.
Yeah, that's just not possible.
So they've got this line of best fit right here on this graph. That's the trend line. They continue to have it go down to zero, and they're like, but it didn't go to zero. I guess that means that some people just aren't intelligent. That doesn't fucking make any sense.
No, like that is just not functionally possible under capitalism for there to be a 0% poverty level. Like that is just inherently not possible with the way this system works. Also, just going off of here, them talking about like, talking about like crime and drug abuse. And it's like, do you think they're talking about like wealthy people crimes? Do you think they're including like money laundering and like other illegal things from wealthy people? Because they're most certainly not talking about crimes that are just viewed in society as normal that you can get by because you have enough money. They are not including that. They're talking about crimes of poor people.
And again, this is a classic problem in sociology, is how do you get reliable data for the crimes that aren't prosecuted?
Right, because there is a lot of those. There's so many of those. The president's doing this every day.
Right, because the police are the ones who apprehend the criminals, and then the justice system charges them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't account for crime. That accounts for the enforcement of that which we consider to be criminal. And those are two very different things.
Exactly. This is such a complicated subject, and I completely see why sociologists were like, we refuse.
Yeah.
We refuse to even do any, like, take this seriously in any capacity, because this is ridiculous. This is somehow, I feel like, less complex understanding of the issues that like you and I could even do.
Yeah,
like, frankly, yeah.
And we're not academics.
No.
I mean, honestly, doing this podcast is kind of making me want to go back to school, and I am, actually for the show every week, I am going into journals and I'm getting peer-reviewed shit because I want to hold myself to a high standard. But like,
literally, yeah, same.
But it's sort of the not even wrong problem. It's like, it's in
a different world. It's in a totally different conception of the conversation we're having.
It's like trying to debate somebody who's like, well, I just can't vote for any Democrat because they're all communists. It's like, well, where do you even begin with something like that, you know?
Yeah, because you can't tell them, well, that's just not true, because that's not going to disprove it for them.
Right.
But it's just not true. It's just not.
It's so far away from being able to establish first principles because you're not engaging with the arguments that people are actually making. Your understanding of the situation is so far removed.
Right. And it's like, where do you begin? Where do you even fucking begin?
But, the bell curve was pretty well received in the conservative world. I don't know if this comes as a surprise.
And it still does. Literally just yesterday, I realized who this was. I was trying to think of like, who was the person that mentioned that they read the bell curve and became like a fascist, like anti-queer person. It was like a detransitioner. It was like a Twitter detransitioner that was like going about, like they were talking about how they got to this point that they're like a radical detrans, like conservative. And it's like, when I read the bell curve, everything started to click. And it's like, of fucking course it was. Of course that was the thing that made everything click, because it's like, it's the one trick that fixes everything. It really just unifies everything in the world that they want to believe.
And I think that's why you saw a lot of positive coverage of this shit in, publications like Commentary, American Spectator, National Review, your usual suspects. It provides a frame, not even a framework, really, more of just an excuse or an easy thing you can point to that's like, well, I'm a conservative. And the reason I'm conservative is that there are certain immutable characteristics, and now I can add intelligence to my list of things that are always fixed and never changing.
And it justifies their racism against black people, against like people from India, from wherever. It doesn't even matter.
But I had some questions at this point. After briefly losing my mind trying to come up with a response to the assertions made in this book, which I think, as I've demonstrated, that way leads madness. So don't do it. It turns out that when this book does cite its sources, and sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it just says some shit, most of the citations come from stuff that was published by an organization called the Pioneer Fund. And I was like, okay, what's the Pioneer Fund? I'm assuming you've never heard of this, right, June?
I never.
Because I certainly hadn't. The Pioneer Fund, this is not to be confused with what you will find now if you go and do a Google search for Pioneer Fund, which is a Y Combinator alumni-founded venture capital fund, which was established in 2016. That's a different Pioneer Fund. This Pioneer Fund was founded in 1937 by an actual Nazi, like an honest-to-goodness, paid-up member of the American Nazi Party named Wycliffe Draper. And this guy wanted to promote, and I'm quoting here, the breeding of white persons who settled in the original 13 colonies prior to the adoption of the Constitution.
Oh my God, dude. Are you fucking kidding me? Come on. This is just straight up not like this is unashamed Nazi shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so these guys, one of many examples of Nazi sympathizers and agitators within the United States in the pre and post-war period, actually. One of the guys who ran this org, by the way, after Wycliffe Draper founded it, Frederick Osborne. That's Henry's nephew.
Oh, come on. No. Okay, so at first when we started talking about all of these people and links together, it sort of just like was like, okay, this is like sort of a weird far right intellectual movement that was sort of catching on. But no, this was like a very intentional and very well connected push amongst the far right to like establish this as an ideology in the United States.
Yeah, this is not just like fringe guys being weird. This is a very well-moneyed operation that had a vested interest in advancing eugenic ideology.
And it's interesting in that statement. Sorry, I just want to go back to that original statement. The breeding of white persons who settled in the original 13 colonies prior to the adoption of the Constitution.
Yeah, those are your real Americans or whatever.
These people are Nazis. There was not a lot of Jewish people settling in the United States around that time. So that's obviously what they're I mean, they're referring to a lot of different things, but I think very obviously Jewish people.
That's a big piece of it,
Jewish people, yeah.
Well, because alongside Osborne, the other guy who ran the Pioneer Fund for a long time was Harry Laughlin. This guy was a diehard anti-Semite, attributed pretty much all of the problems in the world to Jews. And you can read up more on him if you'd like. That's a wild boy right there.
What a horrible name to have. Laughlin? Laughlin. To have that name and be so evil.
Yeah, well,
it makes me frown. It doesn't make me laugh.
Yeah, you're Harry frowning when you hear about a guy like that.
Got him.
So the recipients of research funding from the Pioneer Fund, a guy named Stephen J. Rosenthal wrote a really great article in a scholarly journal called American Behavioral Scientist. And the article is called The Pioneer Fund, Financier of Fascist Research. And I'm just going to read this huge list of people who got funded by Pioneer Fund and what their research was about.
Okay, here we go.
So we got Robert Gordon, a criminologist at Johns Hopkins who claims that low IQ causes black criminality. Linda Gottfredson, a University of Delaware professor who attributes black underrepresentation in the professions to low IQ. Richard Lynn from Northern Ireland, who claims that African blacks have lower intelligence than African Americans. J. Philippe Rushton, a Canadian from South Africa, oh, that's a horrible combination, who asserts that blacks have larger penises and smaller brains compared to whites and Asians because of an evolutionary development. Thomas Bouchard, a University of Minnesota psychologist who has received between $1.3 and $1.5 million from the Pioneer Fund to replace the fraudulent and totally discredited twin studies of Sir Cyril Burt with new studies of identical twins reared apart that claim to have established the predominance of nature over nurture. And Raymond Cattell, a eugenics zealot and founder of the Beyondism Foundation, whose former graduate students and disciples currently form a majority of the National Collegiate Athletic Association, the NCAA's Data Analysis Working Group, whose recommendations have led directly to adoption of new Scholastic Aptitude Test / American College Test, the SATs and the ACTs, standards of eligibility for college athletes that have disproportionately excluded African Americans.
Oh my God. So wait, no, this cannot be genuinely, this is absurd. This is insane to me that so much of like racial stereotyping that we see today, and like, you know, stereotypes about like in specifically the instance of Black people having larger penises than whites and Asian. These are people that the Pioneer Fund funded. These are all, that's what you're telling me. That's all of these people. I genuinely, if you asked me before you told me this, that these like all of these like weird stereotypes and jokes and assumptions about different races, where like, if I had to guess, if it came from like pseudo academic and scientific sources and like doctor sources, or just like random like jokes that people made that became bigger things, especially like with the proliferation of the internet, I would have guessed the latter. I would have not assumed this was from like a fascist institute trying to spread these narratives. That is insane.
Yeah, it's remarkable because, again, what they're able to do is establish sort of an academic veneer for these things.
Yeah.
To be like, well, that's just science. But again, these are going to be things that are generally not published in peer-reviewed journals. They are published in journals that are pseudoscientific and appear to be real science. And we're going to be talking more about that in a little bit as well.
Yeah, and of course, we talked a lot about it before, but the problem with that is the average person doesn't really understand the scientific method and the veracity, like all everything that goes into a scientific peer-reviewed thing. So something we saw a lot during COVID, just for an example, is the big pushback from COVID skeptics and science skeptics in like the age that we live in now, where a lot of people citing a lot of these like really really fucking useless studies that didn't actually have peer review. But if you just get it out there and say, oh, but they're like a scientist, they're like the real deal, it doesn't matter to the like average layperson, because if they just see it's like, oh, it says doctor and this is on a website that looks sort of official, they'll just believe it.
But the problem too is that, you know, in a lot of cases, you can't access the peer-reviewed research.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you either know how to get around some of the darker corners of the internet, or you have access to an academic library, which you almost certainly don't.
Most people don't.
You will be lucky if you're able to even read the abstract.
Yeah, it's a really bad situation.
And to the point of pseudoscience, sources that flood the zone and appear to be scientific, but in fact are not. I learned about a publication called Mankind Quarterly.
Oh. This
was the signature publication of the Pioneer Fund. It is a pseudoscientific anthropology journal. And I'm going to hit you with a couple of the past board members.
Oh, no.
A guy named Corrado Gini of like the Gini coefficient. Are you familiar with that statistical measurement?
I don't think so. No, that doesn't ring a bell.
The Gini coefficient is a measurement of how equal or unequal a given society is.
Oh.
And Gini famously worked under a man named Benito Mussolini.
Come on, no. Come on. Wait,
So he was on the editorial board of Mankind Quarterly, but that's nothing compared to this next guy.
Wait, Josh, I just have to say, hold on. I just have to say before we move on, like just very genuinely, this is crazy that all of this information, like this is just true history. Like these people were in these positions that they were in. My mind is just genuinely blown that like no one, like I didn't know this up until now. I feel like 99% of people don't know any of this. Like why doesn't anyone know this? It's like right in front of us. But I'm just mind blown. I'm just like, sorry. I had to stop you just because I had to like express how fucking crazy this is.
I, at this time, am going to very politely ask that you don't read through any more of the outline until I tell you, because your mind is going to be even more blown by some of the stuff I'm about to tell you. You might have to go for a walk after some of this.
I'll close my eyes. Okay.
So another guy who was on the editorial board of Mankind Quarterly for a time, a man known as Ottmar von Verschner, he mentored Joseph Mengele.
Come on.
Like the guy who did the experiments in the Nazi concentration camps.
Come on. Why are they all connected? How are they all this connected? They didn't have internet.
Well, they had the Pioneer Fund.
They did.
And also the United States government, Operation Paperclip. Look it up. But you know, that's the past, right? Maybe they've changed. Maybe
they've turned a new leaf.
Maybe Mankind Quarterly has turned a new leaf. I want to give you a sense of what kind of work they're publishing now, because it's still being published, right?
Still today?
Still today.
Oh, God.
Volume 65, Issue 1, published in 2024, kicked off with an article called Does Cognitive Ability Mediate Black-White Income Disparities in the USA?
Oh, God. So they're still on the same shit. They're still on the IQ sort of nonsense, explaining it all. So I'm genuinely very curious if anyone, and I'm sure I could take a guess, probably be correct about this one. Stephen Miller probably is a subscriber to this magazine. But I'm very curious how many people in like the modern Republican Party are, because so much of the modern Trump administration that we're watching right now is blasting out very similar, if not word for word, narratives that we've been seeing from this organization.
Yeah, I don't know what their subscriber list is, but I do know some information about Mankind Quarterly now and sort of who's doing their shit. So again, we're tracing a long line here. And before I get to this part, I want to talk about how we've gotten here.
Yeah.
The North American eugenics movement, the whole point was keeping immigrants out of the country and making it so that undesirable populations would breed less. You had guys like Henry Osborne manufacturing consent for this position. You had guys like his nephew, Frederick, running the Pioneer Fund and funding bullshit bunk research that would support these priors. You have guys like Herrnstein and Murray publishing books like The Bell Curve that are then laundering this pseudo-scientific academic jargon and throwing it out into the general public more broadly. And then you have to figure out a way to keep doing it now, because the landscape has changed. Pioneer Fund's website went offline in 2013. And the successor organization to the Pioneer Fund that now publishes Mankind Quarterly is called the Human Diversity Foundation.
That sounds, okay, just off the surface, that sounds like that could be like a vague progressive organization. It's very unassuming.
On paper, yes. It's not. Yeah. Its founder, a Danish guy named Emil Kierkegaard, he actually also has a byline on that article that I mentioned, Does Cognitive Ability Mediate Black-White Income Disparities in the USA? And he also, it turns out, has very strong opinions on the age of consent.
Oh, I'm sure people like this do. I'm not even surprised. Come on, man.
Human Diversity Foundation is mostly funded, at least has been funded heavily by a guy named Andrew Cohenrue. Okay. He's the guy who founded Adult Friend Finder.
What are you talking about? Why are all tech people like this? Why are all tech people like this? Come on.
But here's the part that I think might make you have to take a walk.
Oh, no.
They publish another thing. It's not really a publication. It's a Substack. Let's be real. Yeah. But it's called Aporia.
Okay.
Aporia. One of their writers is an evolutionary psychologist and former University of New Mexico professor named Diana Fleischman.
Okay.
Now, Diana wrote an article for Aporia in April 2024. That was her most recent byline there. It was called You're Probably a Eugenicist. She also used to host their podcast. And as a podcaster,
oh no,
she has appeared on Malcolm and Simone Collins' Based Camp numerous times, and 5 days ago went on noted Weird Turf Louise Perry's podcast to debate Lyman Stone about eugenics.
Come on, no fucking way. Why is there just like a polite society of all of these people that like obviously all agree? Okay, I need to know, just for context, I need to know for my own sake, for the future of this show's sake, what side was Lyman Stone on in this conversation? Because it was a debate.
He was, I think he was, and I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't listen to it. I couldn't bring myself to do that. Okay. They talked a lot about incest, though. They talked a lot about incest. That was like, why are you talking so much about incest?
I'll have to revisit that. I'll listen to it if you want to send it to me. But what I will probably say is, knowing what I know, I feel like Lyman Stone is probably not pro-eugenicist.
No, I mean,
probably.
It would, because Diana would have to be the pro camp, which means that Lyman would have to be anti.
Yeah. But all of this is crazy. Like, these are people that, like, they're out and open. They're unashamed about being a eugenicist. They're in polite, intellectual, center-right society. They're welcomed in these spaces.
I've got one more for you about Diana, June.
Oh, no.
Guess where she spoke in 2023?
Oh, no. Oh, no, it can't be, Josh. It can't be Natal Khan.
Natal Khan.
Come on, dude. I'm crying. Come on, dude. There's no way.
When I sent you that text,
is it recorded? Was it recorded?
It was.
Please.
It was. You can go watch it if you want. So, again, when I sent you that text, like, I think yesterday, about how my brain is melting out of my ears right now.
Yeah.
It was because I was able to trace a straight line between the origin of the modern eugenics movement and NatalCon 2023.
Dude, this is absurd. Also, like, I am reacting this way because, like, for the context to people listening, is like, we have like a general plan for how we do the show and like sort of how each season of the show will go. But I don't think when we started this season with NatalCon 2025, we ever imagined we would get to like 5 episodes later and making these crazy through lines like this. Like, this is a whole,
because this is not, we're like,
this is a whole society of people. They have a group chat. They have a group chat.
This was crazy too. It's like, it makes me feel like I'm like, oh my God, am I being like a QAnon freak right now? Like, am I baking?
That's how I feel.
No,
that's
but
how
I'm
I feel.
not. Like,
this is happening.
These are organizations that have an ideological purpose, and they are all connected, not just parallel to each other right now, but throughout American history.
Yeah, and starts at very clearly Joseph Mengele, like the Nazi, Nazism in Germany. Like, it's like,
and
clearly,
in the United States. Nazism was not just a German phenomenon. That's the other thing that I think a lot of people don't understand.
Absolutely. I think that was that was good that you gave a lot of the context with American history, because that's just a fact, and it's like, it's still thriving today. American Nazism and like, not even Nazism, but like eugenics and like the ideology underpinning all of Nazism is alive and well today in the United States. Yeah, and there's conventions of it where you can go to it and listen to people speak about having children.
That's right. So where does this leave us now?
Dude, this is crazy.
Where does this leave us now? I know, right? The tech industry clearly believes in the idea of a superior intellectual class of individuals. We've been talking about this a lot. And we've also talked about how they see any attempt to regulate their world as impeding human progress. Yeah. Fundamentally. In much the same way that, around the 20th century, impeding eugenics at that time was also holding us back in the minds of the eugenicists at that time from achieving human potential and moral progress. God
damn, dude. That's a really, really good connection that I think is like really important to like keep in mind going forward. Like that they are the offspring of that same movement. They like, and it's not even that they're like hiding it well, because it's like very obvious that a lot of these people are fascists, right? Given like their position under, especially the early part of the Trump administration, but just the way that they frame all of their arguments. Yeah, like they are so clearly trying to do like a little bit of the same thing as like early 1900s fascists did. It's so on the surface, it's so blatantly obvious.
And they're not going to stop, like they've been very clear about this. We talked about it in the biology episode. Him, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Mark Andreessen, whether you're talking about the people who are actual like tech natalists per se, or people who are just on the tech side who are affiliated with the natalists. Either way, their ideal future is one where only the best people, which is to say them and their friends, are going to control how things work and thus guarantee economic growth. So of course eugenics fits into this.
Yeah.
And Anita Se Chan, who I quoted at the beginning of this episode, I wanted to quote her again here because I think she put it very, very well in her book, Predatory Data. Peter Thiel's language, by the post-Trump era, as AI-based products increasingly shaped global trade and economic bases, grew more pessimistic. Speaking before an Oxford University audience in 2022, he highlighted the innovation stagnation problem, that's in quotes, that the current democratic establishment had created across a spate of Western nations by continuously attempting to regulate new technological developments, from AI to biotech. Such efforts, he predicted, would, quote, derange our societies, end quote, by eventually ensuring a no-growth economy. It would impose barriers around the intellectual power of the cognitive elite in the interest of protecting lesser evolved classes, restraining potentials for technological advancement, and inevitably leading to a regression of society and the economy alike.
These people so very clearly think, Josh, like you and I, they think we are like worms.
Yes.
They think we are like fucking, like we are fucking like dirt to these people. I mean, that's like why Elon Musk wants to have like a whole progeny, like a whole fucking line of high IQ children. Like they clearly, like I don't think I was as certain when we started this season, sort of taking a look at the tech natalists, that like it was very like ideologically eugenics, but it so is. So is like they if they saw, like, I have ulcerative colitis, if they got their way, they would probably be like, okay, that's like something we have to like we gotta like abort that. We gotta account for like not have like, and it's like it would be good if that like disease could be cured. But like they would do drastic things to ensure such a thing, right? Like this is so obvious.
Yeah, Junior, you're talking to a guy with cystic fibrosis, which is like
that's
one
why I said
of
you
the
too, both of us.
worst inherited recessive genetic diseases. Yeah,
yeah, you and I both like would be under the project of the far right in the past, and right now would be like we would be put down for this shit.
Yeah, for sure.
That's crazy. Sorry to go really dark there, but
no, you're right.
It's just true. It's just true. Yeah.
And we can see echoes of this idea too, like this entire idea that we've been talking about for this whole episode of an entire class of immigrants as being like inherently unreliable or unworthy in the news that's been coming out the past few days. I'm sure you saw Trump intends to, in his words, permanently pause migration from what he calls third world countries.
Yeah.
And what that seems to mean, in effect, and this is since those National Guard troops got shot in D.C., all domestic asylum applications have been paused for everybody.
Yep. Yeah. That's essentially collective punishment for what is a tragedy. There is nothing to do other than like we can go fairly deep. We can go like geopolitical on it and like talk about the blowback of the U.S. involvement in the Afghan war leading to this moment directly. That's a very easy through line to make, but they are not making that connection because that would imply that the U.S. is at fault, which cannot be the case by these people. It has to be the fault of an ethnic group, of ethnicity, of race.
Or it has to be the fault of a political opponent, right? This is Joe Biden's fault. It has nothing to do with a decades-long policy of the CIA arming and training people in Afghanistan, right?
No, that would be too complex. The idea of blowback is a little too complex for people who just want to simplify these things all the way down to IQ.
But I guess the other piece that I wanted to bring in here, and this connects with what we were talking about in season 1, is the family values people.
Yeah.
And I wanted to draw a comparison here between what we were talking about toward the beginning, where Henry Osborne had to appeal to fundamentalist Christians by being like, well, this is God's plan, to how a lot of fundamentalist Christians now are at least facially skeptical of technatalism in the whole project. Like,
it seems like it. Like,
I have a quote here. This is from a Heritage Foundation article from August 2024. And Heritage, obviously, we did a whole episode about them. They are the Christian conservative think tank, right? What may result in more children of a certain kind in the short run will ultimately shatter the worldview necessary for childbearing to flourish among all persons, and not just a select few. Civilization, in a very real sense, only survives if people view family formation and childbearing as a fundamental, pre-market element of the human experience. Childbearing in the long run requires a proper moral obligation to protect it from inappropriate intrusions of technology. Still, a demographic crisis is upon us. We should encourage people to have more children, and not simply as a means of mitigating this greater crisis. This is where pro-family natalism comes in. The pro-family approach recognizes that marriage and family formation are the basis for overcoming the birth dearth in the United States. By encouraging family formation, we ensure that children are born into environments where they are most likely to thrive and nurture their own love for children.
It's really notable how hearing this, I'm like, oh, wow, this is such a relief, right? Like, holy shit. The evangelicals seem to me sort of like, and of course there is, like,
this is low-key, this is low-key Lyman Stone-coded, for real, for real.
It is. It's like, it's a shout out our friend Lyman Stone.
Lyman.
I really, again, I said this recently, but I cannot believe that this man has come up in like every episode in the last like couple of months.
He's very prolific.
He is. But all of this to say is like, there is a really clear difference here between the language that the very intentional evangelical natalist movement uses compared to like the tech natalist. Yeah. Like with this statement you just read out, it's very clear that it's like they still do care obviously really deeply about like, oh, like natalism and the birth rate, and it's like this is a disaster. But the framing of it is a lot simpler and a lot less, I feel like, nefarious on the surface. Like I feel like with the first season we analyze a lot of like deeper beyond just like phrases like this and what makes it nefarious. But like reading out like just this whole episode that we've done on eugenics today so far is like, I don't even understand how, like, you have to be evil. You have to just be outwardly evil and believe fascistic things to even accept the framing of so much of this. Like where there is like, for the like religious natalist, there is like the underpinning of like virtue and like family and like some sort of values. What those values are, not necessarily ideal or good or that I agree with, but at least I'm gonna make that joke that I forget who they made it about Nazis, where it's like, at least there's an ideology, right? Like,
right, yeah.
At least there's virtue.
Yeah, it's Walter in Big Lebowski. I mean, say what you will about the tenets of National Socialism, dude. At least it's an ethos.
Yeah. So I couldn't help myself but make that joke about
the nihilist Lebowski. God, I love that movie.
But no, it's a really interesting like point that it feels like they're trying to link up at places like NatalCon, but I don't know if it's working. I don't know if the link up is happening.
I don't know either.
Very, very clearly. Yeah.
But what I do wonder about is like, is this a tenable coalition? Because I'm not sure. Like, I think that as long as Trump is in charge, the answer is yes. But I also think that Trumpism seems a lot less durable now than it did even 3 months ago.
I totally agree.
Honestly, I feel like the Charlie Kirk assassination, that was an inflection point.
It was like the state-mandated reverence from the Trump administration really backfired in a way alongside of like how like the economy is going. Like there were so many different factors that all converged all at once back in that September. And I feel like I don't know if it'll work, but what I do know is I do think in the wake of Trumpism of like MAGA, there will be this continued like power imbalance. And I feel like what we're witnessing sort of right now is sort of the battle between the two to see which one becomes more influential in the future. I think that is very clear. I think right now, especially just because the sheer amount of capital that these people have, I feel like the tech natalist will be more likely to win as they continue to get more and more capital and like just different, like just eating up different parts of society. But again, time will tell. This is like I feel like we're like on the cusp. We're at the beginning of sort of witnessing this like in the first year, for sure, first year or two of watching this sort of play out, this power struggle.
I would agree with you that the technatalists have the upper hand right now, both in terms of cultural, like political capital and actual financial capital.
Yeah.
But I don't know. They're so fucking weird and off-putting.
They are. And that's the thing. That's the thing is they suck. They just really suck.
Like I could, and I have spent time around perfectly nice Christians who nevertheless have a lot of bigoted viewpoints, but I still am able to, I don't know, tolerate them on a human level. You could not pay me to spend an hour in a room alone with Elon Musk. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I guess think of it this way, though, too, is that the way that we've seen, like in our episodes about Balaji and our episode about Elon Musk, and just more broadly analyzing this current movement that we're watching, is the way they talk. Even in this episode, you talked about like how regulation strangles them, and like the early push with Doge to break down regulation. I think what it is they're trying to not give anyone a choice. They want to have that complete control, and they will get that by any means necessary.
Right.
And that's why someone like Balaji really, really idolizes the idea of the network state, because in that world, he gets full control. Mm-hmm. Him and his buddies can create the societies they want to see. So they're thinking even bigger picture than I think even like the religious evangelical natalists in that way. Like they're thinking societal, like beyond society, beyond America, beyond the state, where like the traditional family focused type person is thinking within the bounds of the country. They have like the true patriotism.
They're very America first. Yeah. It's
yeah.
And again, I think those are fault lines that as time goes by, you're going to see those fault lines continue to widen and rub up against each other, as fault lines so often do.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting.
There's going to be an earthquake. There's going to be a earthquake of babies.
There certainly will. Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see, especially as like society becomes less and less religious going forward.
Yeah,
how that plays into it.
Well, that's been, I think, another fun conversation, another fun week here of a surprisingly fun conversation about some really awful shit, which I feel like we try to do here every week. If you've enjoyed this episode, again, we have that Patreon, patreon.com/illconceived. Our next mailbag episode, we've already gotten a bunch of letters about the childhood episode. And so we're very excited to read some more of those off and talk about them. I also talked a little bit more on last week's Patreon episode about my experience seeing those weird natalism ads for the IVF company. And then we talked a bit about Balaji and his whole deal. So, you know, if you want to support the show, the Patreon is the only way that we are monetizing. And I think the only way that we are going to monetize the show itself, because I hate ads, and I don't think that there's this. I mean, maybe if Nucleus IVF Plus wants to sponsor us, maybe we can do some sponsored ad reads for them.
Yeah, we can figure that out. We can work out those details if that comes our way. But yeah, no, I think if you want to help support the show, our Patreon is there, and we give you a little bit bonus content every week, at least an hour every week on top of the main feed episodes that you're listening to now.
That's right. And it's unedited.
Yep. With very few exceptions. Very, there's been like one edit maybe.
But like you get to hear us stumble. You get to hear us stutter. You get to hear us make jokes that don't land. If you've ever been wondering what gets caught in the edit, well, just listen to one of our bonus mailbag episodes and you'll find out, baby.
All the dog shit's in there. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Anyway, June, I guess that's it, right? We'll see you next week, okay?
See ya.
Okay, bye.
Bye.